Hello, my spooky friends. As you can see, the background is different and my equipment is different. Thank God for that. Okay, so the whole point of this video is I am going to be reading some stories, probably one a month, from a book here that is a local book, and it is called Historic Indianapolis Crimes, Murder, Mystery, in the Circle City, which happens every single day here. And it is written by Fred D. Cavender, I guess is how you would pronounce his last name. So, what I'm going to do, kiddies, is I am going to read a story once a month, and it's going to be exactly from this book. There's a lot of good stuff in here. You wouldn't think Indiana and crime, Indiana and murder and mystery, but yeah, it goes on every single day here. Right now, we have an extremely high crime rate. It is off the charts. I am not even joking. And unfortunately, it's happening around the downtown area and places like that. And the police are baffled. They don't know what else to do right now. There's always candlelight vigils going on. There's neighborhood watches going on. But it never seems to be enough. But these are exceptional tales. Tales that are chilling and very mysterious. So I'm not quite sure what I want to title this series. On my other channel, I had started doing what I called Unsolved Indiana. But some of these cases are not really about unsolved cases. They are just, some of them could be, but some are just about some serial killers we have, crazy people, things of that nature. So not really quite sure what I'm going to call this yet. I guess I'm going to have to think about it, or maybe I'll just go back to Unsolved, or I could call it True Crime. I don't know. Anyway, so let's begin. So I am going to be reading. So sit back, relax, get a drink, dim the lights, or listen to this in your car. Treat it like a podcast. Just listen to the story. So the first one I'm going to be reading to you is the actual introduction into the book, which when I read it, I was just totally excited to read the rest of the book. It made me want to continue to read on. And I just found it very interesting. I don't normally read introductions to books, I'll be honest. I just want to get to the story, right? But I'm glad that I read this introduction because it's really cool. So, let's begin, shall we? Okay, so Indianapolis patrolman Hugh Burns was off duty one evening in the summer of 1883 when a citizen approached him about an argument underway in a nearby boarding house. The supplicant knew that Burns was a cop. As Burns entered, the argument became physical, and one of the participants, John Jetter of Kentucky, pulled a weapon and shot Burns to death. Jetter escaped punishment, contending that he didn't know Burns was a policeman. Burns was the first Indianapolis policeman murdered in the line of duty, but he was not the last. And civilians in the capital had been homicide victims for years before Burns died. The first murder in the city, then a mere fraction of its later size, occurred in the 1830s, and slayings never have stopped. Because of its size, the city is destined to be the capital of Hoosier homicides. Growing population does that. Yet with one possible exception, the Indiana capital has never experienced serial killers or endured the drama and fear of, say, Son of Sam. Some homicides stir the public. Cases in point are the heartless torture and slaying of Sylvia Likens and the Indianapolis Massacre of 7, including children. The public seems to register limited concern about many killings. Television dulls murders as they come into your living room nightly on both the news and crime dramas. On TV programs, the killer is caught within an hour via state-of-the-art tools, used almost instantaneously by actor investigators. Sometimes they employ computer magic that exists only in the minds of writers. In real life, some killers are the stuff of legend. Jack the Ripper comes to mind. And some so-called killers are legendary in Indiana criminal annals. Luminary bandit John H. Dillinger was born in Indianapolis. Despite his shoot-it-out image, he was accused of only one slaying, the death of East Chicago policeman William P. O'Malley. Some think it perhaps wasn't Dillinger's shot at all. In Dillinger's day and before, slayings were simpler. In a sense, they were old-fashioned murders for hire, slayings of passion, homicides for retribution, killings to eliminate witnesses and collateral damage. Today, these motives are often eclipsed by the slayings and drug deals gone bad. These motives are often eclipsed by the slayings and drug deals gone bad and drug-high homicides and drive-by shootings. Not only are the gunmen often unknown, but sometimes the identity of the real intended victim also remains uncertain. And that is something that we hear on the news every single night here in Indiana. Every single night on the news. And we're not talking one or two people. We're talking several. We're talking over the weekend of having 7 to 10 people. And this is occurring every single day. Homicides gain added sensation when the killer escapes justice. Murder does not always out, despite what the novelists and forensic scientists tell you. The era has a lot to do with it. Years ago, DNA evidence and other investigative techniques and technologies didn't exist. The most notorious unsolved crimes of old created a cult of curiosity. Newspapers and magazines routinely dig up anniversary angles to rehash the still mysterious homicides. Deciding on intriguing homicides obviously involves extensive selectivity. Should the followers of Hoosier Jim Jones in Guyana be included? Hoosier Jones began his tragic course after founding the People's Temple in Indianapolis. Yes, that Jim Jones is from Indianapolis. Certainly the deaths of 900 of his followers in Guyana were homicides. Obviously, the gunmen who shot some of the victims were killers. Jones' participation presents a fine point. Convincing others to kill themselves differs marginally from applying the poison yourself. Jones was cruel, controlling, and probably delusional. But his role as a murderer is best left to philosophers and possibly theologians. Obviously, perimeters must be narrower than that. Murdered policemen are a special category. The job puts them in harm's way. One might typify Indianapolis police killings with 3 cases, one shockingly brutal, from the 1930s era of bandits, another a landmark in murder punishments, and a third that launched one of the biggest manhunts in Indianapolis history. Let these police murders, then, serve as templates for Indianapolis police slayings. All right, so that was the introduction. Isn't that awesome and intriguing? Doesn't it make you want to hear more? Because it certainly did to me. And I live here, and some of the stuff in here I had never heard of in my entire life. And I thought I knew everything spooky about Indiana, but I was wrong. So with that, I am going to continue, and I am going to read the first story. So moving right along. And if you're bored, then you don't need to listen to the first story, but I recommend it because it is really, really good. Okay, and it's called Making Dillinger Look Like a Piker. Dr. Emmett Rose was out on a call the afternoon of April 27th, 1936, when a man approached his wife in their Indianapolis home office near Garfield Park. Mrs. Rose was suspicious. The caller said that a friend had been shot because he had been running around with another man's wife. Not so unusual in itself, but the wounded man was being helped by his 3 companions from a car with Illinois license plates. I thought it strange someone should bring a wounded man all the way from Illinois for my husband to treat, she said later. When assured that the doctor would not return for some time, the men drove away. When he returned and heard what had happened, the doctor told his wife to call the police. The police told her that if the men returned, she should call again. Later that day, Mrs. Rose peeked into her husband's office and saw him talking to the man who had been there earlier. The expression on Dr. Rose's face served as a warning to her, and she retreated out the back door of the house at 2153 Barth Avenue. Although the men in the parked car saw her speed to a nearby drugstore, they took no action. "I don't know why they didn't shoot me, but they didn't," she said. At the drugstore, she asked the clerk to call the police. The men Mrs. Rose was dealing with, although she didn't know it, were the Brady gang, which had formulated the year before in an Indianapolis garage. Al Brady, born in Goodland, Indiana, was neglected, orphaned at 16, and imprisoned for burglary. In prison, he determined to become a better criminal. He hooked up with James Dalhover, a fellow inmate from Cincinnati, who had a record for making illegal liquor, stealing cars, and committing assaults. In October 1935, they were joined by Clarence Lee Schaefer, Jr. of Indianapolis, who, by age 12, had been arrested for stealing cars and stripping them. Schaefer induced Ruel Charles Gisking, also of Indianapolis, to later join the gang. And I apologize, I probably totally botched that name. I'm so sorry. In January, the initial trio met in a garage on Park Avenue in Indianapolis, where they mounted a machine gun on a steel tripod. Dillinger never had anything like this, Brady is believed to have said. They set out on their crime spree, holding up jewelry stores and big food markets on Saturday nights. At a jewelry store in Lima, Ohio, 3 went inside and left Dolliver on alert in the car. When he saw policeman Jess Ford park a patrol car nearby and climb out of it, Dolliver jumped out, gun in hand, and confronted Ford. But Ford's partners saw the confrontation from a restaurant window while he was dining. This policeman, E.O. Swanee, ran out shooting. In the ensuing battle, both policemen were wounded by machine gun fire, and Gisking was winged by a bullet that passed through one leg and lodged in the other. The gang escaped. Gisking was the wounded man Dr. Rose was being asked to treat. By that time, the slug had been in Gisking's leg for a month. When the drugstore clerk, alerted by Mrs. Rose, called police, Sergeant Richard Rivers, patrolling near the Barth Avenue address, got the run. He parked in the alley behind Dr. Rose's house. When he reached the front porch and started to enter, he was cut down by a blaze of machine gun bullets from the car. Sergeant Rivers died almost instantly. Al Brady, the man who had been talking to Dr. Rose, fled the house, revolver in hand, and jumped in the car, which sped away. Police agencies all over the Midwest were alerted. The gang headed for Chicago. In the Lima shootout, Brady had dropped the card of a fence they used in Chicago, and that gave away the gang. When concerned in Chicago, Brady withheld gunfire, possibly because of a blonde who was with him. Captured, he was returned to Indianapolis. The fence also helped to identify Dolliver's girlfriend. Police seized him. A tipster led police to Schaefer, found reading a magazine in his Indianapolis home. When Brad, Dolliver, and Schaefer were indicted, their attorney obtained a change of venue to Hancock County, and the 3 were transferred to the Greenfield jail. The trio loosened rivets in a yard-long steel bar in their cell, and when Hancock County Sheriff Clarence Watson came in with their meal on October 11th, they clubbed him and escaped in a commandeered Chevy. They began a series of bank robberies in 4 Midwestern states, killing at least 3 citizens. On May 27, 1937, the gangsters hit the bank in Goodland, Brady's hometown, for $4,000 and fled in a maroon sedan. With main roads blocked, Indiana State Trooper Paul Miniman and Deputy Sheriff Elmer Craig began searching. They spotted the maroon sedan parked behind a church in northeast White County. When Miniman stopped for the car, he was mowed down as part of gunfire and died 64 hours later. The deputy sheriff was wounded but survived. The Federal Bureau of Investigation joined in searching for the gang. They were on the 10 most wanted list. On October 12, 1937, a year and a day after the three gangsters had escaped jail in Greenfield, FBI agents cornered them in Bangor, Maine. They were traced there through an order for a gun they had placed with a sports store. But when the gangsters arrived at the store, an FBI agent was posing as a clerk. He crushed Dolliver's skull with a gun butt. Schaefer and Brady, outside in the car, started blazing with guns. Brady fired 4 times with Minimum's revolver before being fatally wounded. Schaefer was killed while trying to escape. Dolliver surrendered. He was returned to Indianapolis, tried for the murder of Sergeant Rivers, and executed under a federal warrant on December 13, 1938. Gesking, who eventually had to go to a hospital, was also captured. The disposition of his case seems to be unknown. Some in Indiana were disturbed that Brady was buried in a pauper's grave in Maine. Most of the gang's robberies had been in Indiana, and Hoosier lawmen felt cheated that the gang had been brought to justice in New England. Wow, what a story. Although I must say that these criminals in this story were not very smart, and they were not very careful. So there are some pictures. So here is a picture. It says, Patrolman Rivers had this view from the alley where he parked. He was slain at the entrance to the house. So here is the house, and here is the entrance, and that's where he was shot and killed. It was right there. And let's see what other pictures I have here. Okay, so here are the gunmen. This is Brady. This is Dolliver. And this one is Schaefer. This is Richard Rivers, who was gunned down near Garfield Park. And this is the house where Gesking went in and was asking for treatment. Right here, this house here. Oh, wow. Such a terrible ending to innocent lives there. But, you know, those criminals were just a wannabe gang. And it sounds like they got away with a lot of stuff before they were finally captured. Like I said, once a month I am going to be reading to you more of those stories from around Indiana. And then once I have finished that book, I have other stories too up my sleeve that I will be reading to you that are a bit more grotesque, and they do deal with unsolved murders and mysteries from around here in Indiana. So that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you come back and watched the next story. So until then, this is Spooky Marshmallow saying, stay spooky, my friends.